Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today, Linda Peek Schacht from Lipscomb University. Linda, we referenced this a little bit in talking about the impact of women in some of the recent elections, but I want to talk specifically about the Me Too hashtag movement, the silence breakers that Time Magazine named the Persons of the Year. People are now speaking out, women are now speaking out about sexual harassment and abuse, and it's really exploded into the news the last couple of weeks and months, but actually this moving in this direction has been coming for much longer than that.
Decades. As Time Magazine said, maybe centuries, but at least in this country, decades. And while it appears to be an overnight revolution, it did not start with the Women's March, although that was a catalyst to
settlements that went with Fox News and other things like that that were in the news and perhaps said to women, well, okay, people will listen to me. I can speak out about this. Well,
they have the courage now to speak out because there is courage in numbers, right? Power in numbers. I think also that it did play a role in Alabama because some of those soccer moms, some of those conservative women from the suburbs around the major cities stayed home or wrote somebody in because
and the African American women turned out.
They did, yes, they really did. And I do think that there's kind of a sense of unrest right now about how does this revolution, which really has no leader, you know, the hashtag Me Too has no leader, but everywhere I've gone recently outside of Nashville, I've heard women close speeches by saying, oh, and Me Too.
This has been, I think, driven as well by social media in a way, perhaps, but it also raises the question, is this going to be an ultimate fad, or is this going to be something we just seen the tip of the iceberg of this? Where is this going after we get past this initial stage where we've had a lot of people of prominence, particularly in media and politics and entertainment, being exposed on this? But
it's not a fad. It is something I think as powerful as what happened when Betty Friedan had the feminine mystique. But this is the difference. That was organizing white women in the 1950s and 60s to be able to claim their rightful place in the workplace and other things. This is across all demographics, across races, across age, and you're seeing it. And I was happy that Time showed that it's in every industry. And so the question, I think, becomes, not every crime deserves the death penalty. And this is not a popular thing to say. Some women have said it, but we do need to figure out as this moves forward the appropriate punishment for this span of sexual misconduct.
And is there a process to be involved in this? It did seem, you mentioned, not the death penalty, but it did seem that sometimes people were just learning about this and the person involved, there had already been something decided. He was either resigning or he'd been fired or whatever it might have been. I mean, it just seemed that people kind of got in at the end of the story and didn't even realize it was one until something this had happened, and they didn't quite know how to process it.
Well, I think many, if not most, maybe 99% of the ones that happened to, they were gone. If you hear what the charges are, both the decades-long abuse, but also the extreme nature of the charges, it was well-deserved. I guess what I'm saying is the culture is changing, the culture needs to change, and as women are calling more and more for transparency, for instance, on the Hill, because we spent, what, $17 million paying off people on the Hill, and we need to know about that. So transparency is important, but also I think figuring out the best way to respond to each of these charges.
You mentioned the disclosure about the settlements that have been paid for out of taxpayer money.
Yes.
You see efforts, Congressman Cooper here, Congressman Blackburn, and others in our delegation are signing up for bills to change that process. But I don't see it from the leadership that they could bring it out to the floor as quickly as they could in a lot of these cases, as they have done with health care and with taxes. Are they missing the boat on this? If they don't deal with this before next year's election, isn't there going to be a price to pay for that?
Yeah, there'll be a pox on both their houses if they don't do something about this. But I really do think that Senator Gillibrand and others are going to force the issue. One thing that I've wondered, just from my years on the Hill, is how much the leadership in both parties knew about the payments. because somebody had to approve them. And if there is this hesitancy, because that is going to come out as well. But it's going to get passed. It's going to get passed.
There's also this whole question about sort of, you know, is there a generational divide about this? You saw the race in Alabama. You saw that white women still voted primarily for Roy Moore. Now, some of those were the more older women involved, but among the younger women, they definitely voted the other way. Is there a generational gap or problem here in this particular issue, and how even people that are women perceive this?
Well, again, I don't think Alabama may be the best example, because I think those conservatives were voting on the abortion issue. But I think if you look at Virginia and other places, that yes, there is a generational issue, but I also think there's a generational issue in terms of the leadership of both parties. And you see the House talking about expanding their leadership in some way to include the Freedom Caucus, but also to get younger people in. That's on the Republican side. The Democrats need to do the same thing.
It's going to be an interesting year in 2018. You're looking for this to be perhaps one of the more interesting midterm elections perhaps we've seen in a number of years.
Yes, and for several reasons. One is testing the Trump base, testing his power with his base. Again, I don't think we can go by Alabama, but Virginia gives us an idea. It's going to be the year of the soccer mom. Will those soccer moms from suburban areas who are Republicans, will they stay home? Will they write in candidates like they did in Alabama? Or will they go with Donald Trump?
Linda, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again.
Great holiday season. Happy New Year. We'll see you back in 2018.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us on Inside Politics. Hope you can be back here again for a future show. If you can't get enough politics in the meantime, go to the NewsChannel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's a commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.